I'm from New Hampshire. In my early 20s, I lived about 30 minutes outside of Manchester. At the time, I had just ended a 2-year relationship with my girlfriend. It was a strange phase in my life, a kind of limbo where I was wandering, trying to figure things out, and maybe searching for meaning without realizing it. My grandmother was deeply religious and attended liturgy every Sunday without fail. After my grandfather passed away, I began going to church with her. At first, it was mostly to support her, but part of me felt like I needed some grounding too. My grandfather, a decorated veteran, was well known and respected in our community, and his passing left a huge void in her life. Despite her grief, her faith never wavered. She believed wholeheartedly that he was finally with the Lord, and the comfort she found in that belief was something I truly admired. Faith like that, faith that brings real peace, is rare. I think a lot of people spend their lives searching for it, even if they can't put it into words. One Sunday after service, I met someone who would change my life forever. It still feels surreal, almost like a fever dream. She stood out instantly, dark curly hair, striking hazel eyes, and I realized I'd never seen her before. That was unusual in our tight-knit church community. I waited until the service ended and then approached her. Part of me was drawn to her beauty, but there was also this curiosity about who she was and why she was there. She seemed about my age, which made her presence even more intriguing. We started talking, and from the first exchange, there was a spark. A connection so immediate it felt almost magnetic. Her name was Kaylee. She had a quiet, mysterious charm that pulled me in. I tried asking her about her past, her family, and her life, but she playfully dodged my questions, joking that I'd have to take her out if I wanted answers. I couldn't help but enjoy the banter. Eventually, she admitted her family had just moved to the area and that she was attending a nearby college, which explained why I'd never seen her before. By the time our conversation ended, I had her number. For the rest of the week, I couldn't stop thinking about her. We texted a lot and followed each other on social media. Her Instagram surprised me. She had very few followers, but I liked that. Falling for someone who wasn't in the spotlight felt refreshing. As we got to know each other, she opened up more about her life. Her family situation was rough. Her stepfather was an abusive alcoholic, and her biological father was even worse. She wouldn't go into much detail, but she mentioned that her family had to move to escape him. She'd left behind everything she knew, including transferring schools. I didn't press her for more, grateful that she was letting me in at all. Beneath her enigmatic exterior, there was a vulnerability that made me care for her even more. I hadn't asked her on a date yet, thinking I'd see her at church again. Sure enough, she was there the following Sunday. After the service, I worked up the nerve to ask her out. She smiled and said yes without hesitation. We made plans for later that week, and I spent the days leading up to it feeling equal parts nervous and excited. When the night came, we kept things simple, dinner and a movie. It wasn't fancy, but it gave us time to talk and get to know each other better. The night felt perfect. She was attentive, genuinely interested in what I had to say, and such a good listener. After dinner, I wasn't ready for the evening to end, so I suggested we go for a drive. She agreed, and we headed out of town onto one of those quiet, 2-lane highways surrounded by trees. Everything was going so well. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Out of nowhere, Kaylee started speaking, but it wasn't in English. Her words were fast and slurred, like French or something similar. At first, I thought she was joking, but then I saw her eyes. They rolled back, leaving only the whites. My heart started pounding as panic set in. It looked like she was having a seizure, or something worse. I swerved, nearly crashing into the guardrail before pulling over to the shoulder. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and called for an ambulance, telling them I thought she was having a seizure. Meanwhile, Kaylee kept muttering, her head trembling slightly. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified, unsure if touching her would help or hurt. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. She snapped her head toward me, her eyes back to normal, and gave me a wild, wide-eyed stare that I'll never forget. Before I could say anything, she threw open the car door and sprinted into the woods. Full speed, just like that. I sat there, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. My hands were trembling, and my mind was racing. By the time the paramedics and police arrived, I had no answers for them. I told them everything, the strange words, her eyes, how she ran into the woods. They listened carefully, took my statement, and assured me they'd do their best to find her. But they never did. Kaylee vanished that night. I went back to church the next Sunday, hoping to see her, but she wasn't there. Her Instagram was gone. She blocked my number, or maybe the number itself was deactivated. Even a friend I asked to text her couldn't reach her. No one at church knew who she was either. It was as if she had never existed. To this day, I don't know what happened to Kaylee. I've moved away since then, but the memory still haunts me. It's hard to think about home without thinking about that night, and the girl I'll never truly understand. My family owns this beat-up 2012 Volvo that's barely hanging on. Somehow, though, it refuses to quit. The car has a laundry list of issues: soft brakes, a temperamental engine, and electronics that barely function. My parents keep it around, waiting for the day it finally breaks down for good, so they'll have an excuse to buy something new. Meanwhile, I'm the one stuck driving it. Among its many problems, the windshield wipers don't work at all. Driving in the rain is a nightmare, borderline suicidal, honestly. Even a light drizzle makes it impossible to see. Thankfully, we live in Nevada, the driest state in the US, so rain isn't usually a concern. I still remember elementary school teachers making a big deal about that fact, though I never really understood why. This story happened a couple of summers ago. I was driving back from a solo trip to visit my friend Calvin, who lived a few states away. We hadn't seen each other in years, and I figured the long drive could be part of the adventure. I loved being on the road, cruising through stretches of empty desert. The drive to his place had been amazing, and staying with him for a few nights was even better. We caught up, drank way too much, and had a blast. The drive home was smooth, for most of the way. But everything changed when I crossed back into Nevada. That's when I hit a storm. Not just a little sprinkle or some light rain, but a full-blown thunderstorm, with lightning and torrential downpours. Later, I'd learn it was one of the heaviest rainfalls in years. Driving in that kind of rain would have been challenging for anyone, but with my busted windshield wipers, it was impossible. I had no choice but to pull over. I parked far off the highway, deep into the desert shoulder, in case a truck or some other vehicle didn't see me. My plan was to wait out the storm and maybe try to sleep in the car. I thought about calling for help, maybe the police, but money was tight, and I wanted to avoid getting a ticket for the car's many issues. Besides, I wasn't about to ask my 65-year-old parents to drive 3.5 hours to rescue me. So, I sat there alone, in the middle of a thunderstorm, hoping the rain would let up soon. The first hour passed uneventfully. Not a single car drove by. The storm raged on without showing any signs of stopping. After another hour, though, something changed. I started to feel uneasy. I can't explain why, but I got this overwhelming urge to move the car. It was pouring, so I knew that wasn't an option, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I found myself scanning the darkness outside, peering through the rain-covered windows like I was expecting to see something, or someone. There was nothing out there, just endless desert. The sun was setting, though, and soon everything would be pitch black. The thought of spending the night out there unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. I tried to distract myself by watching the lightning flashes in the distance. Under different circumstances, I might have found the desert storm beautiful. Eventually, night fell. The rain was still coming down hard, and I decided it was time to conserve energy and try to get some sleep. But just as I was about to close my eyes, I noticed flashes of light in the distance. At first, I thought it was more lightning, but the bursts were sharper, more deliberate. Flashlights. I watched, frozen, as the lights darted through the darkness. There were multiple beams, moving erratically, like they were being wielded by people who were stumbling or drunk. My stomach dropped when I realized the lights were getting closer. Panic set in. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone, scrambled out of the car, and ran to hide behind a nearby rock formation. Rain soaked through my clothes, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding as I crouched behind the rock, praying the rain would mask the sound of my breathing. Peeking around the edge of the rock, I saw them. 3 figures with flashlights circling my car. They moved like they were searching for something, or someone. Their movements were erratic, almost inhuman, and it gave me chills. Then, without warning, one of them fired a gunshot into the sky. I bit down on my lips so hard I tasted blood, willing myself to stay as still as possible. For what felt like an eternity, I stayed frozen, too scared to even look. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek again, my stomach dropped. The flashlights were gone. The desert was pitch black, but just as I thought they'd left, the lights reappeared, flickering wildly around my car like they were taunting me. I couldn't stay there all night. Shaking, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Whispering, I explained the situation to the operator, my voice barely audible. She assured me help was on the way. I hung up, feeling both relieved and terrified. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, I saw the faint glow of police lights in the distance. The second the red and blue lights came into view, the figures bolted, disappearing into the darkness. By the time the officer reached my car, they were long gone. I ran through the rain, waving my arms to flag him down. Grateful but still shaken, I explained everything. The officer didn't seem particularly surprised, which somehow made the whole ordeal even scarier. He stayed with me until the storm passed, and thankfully, he didn't tow the car. I've thought about that night often, and I still can't make sense of it. Whatever those people were doing, I'm just glad I wasn't in the car when they arrived. I haven't been on a road trip since,